When other famous characters besides Steamboat Willie will enter the public domain, Part 3. First off, I have to clear some things up, because there was a ton of confusion in the comments of my first two videos, and I missed a lot of things while doing research for them. For example, even though his original film is still copyrighted, King Kong, the character, is technically already in the public domain because the book was released before the film, and it never had its copyright renewed. The main focus of these videos is United States copyright law, because I'm not an expert in copyright law in every country, but many first world countries do have similar copyright law to the US, so keep that in mind. In the United States, everything made in 1928 or earlier is now in the public domain as of January 1st, 2024. That means that a ton of historic literature like The Scarlet Letter, David Copperfield, Moby Dick, Uncle Tom's Cabin, The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, and The Great Gatsby are all in the public domain. As well as, yes, the earliest version of Mickey Mouse. I say Mickey Mouse and not Steamboat Willie, because look, it says right here in the intro to the cartoon, a Mickey Mouse sound cartoon. He was still referred to as Mickey Mouse in Steamboat Willie. That being said, the name Mickey Mouse is still trademarked, even though the copyright on the original cartoon has expired, and trademarks do not expire as long as they're continually renewed. So maybe still don't use the Mickey Mouse name if you intend to sell something with Steamboat Willie in it. The reason everything made before 1928 is now in the public domain is because for most intellectual property published before 1978, copyright expires 95 years after first publication. I say most because there have been a lot of confusing and intricate bills passed over the years that have complicated things. For example, works published from 1964 to 1977 without notice are currently in the public domain, but for works published from 1969 to 1977 with notice, copyright doesn't expire until 95 years after publication. See, before 1989, creators were required to notify or register their publications with the government if they wanted any sort of long-term legal protection for their works. As of March 1st, 1989, that's no longer the case. Intellectual property is now under copyright, quote, the moment it is created and fixed in a tangible form that is perceptible either directly or with the aid of a machine or device, according to copyright.gov, the official website of the US Copyright Office. This means that a number of early cartoons or animated films that came out after Steamboat Willie are already in the public domain. According to Wikipedia, that includes Aladdin and His Wonderful Lamp, featuring Popeye, the 1939 film Gulliver's Travels, The Mummy Strikes, featuring Superman, Pantry Panic featuring Woody Woodpecker, A Tale of Two Kitties featuring Tweety Bird, and Who's Who in the Zoo featuring Porky Pig. But does that mean that all of those characters are in the public domain? No? I don't think so. It's so hard to get a concrete answer on this. I'm not a lawyer, but I know a few, and I've been told that it would be awfully hard to make a case that you own Popeye, just because there's a cartoon with Popeye in it in the public domain. However, when copyright on the first Popeye cartoon, starring Popeye himself, enters the public domain next year, then it's fair game. So yes, unfortunately, chances are we'll get a handful of Popeye horror movies next year. Sorry. Also, there was a heated debate in my first two videos as to whether copyright expires 95 years after publication or 70 years after the death of the author. Here's the answer. If the author is known and was the sole creator of the work, copyright expires 70 years after that author's death. But if the author is unknown, or if the work was created by a corporation, the copyright expires 95 years after first publication, or 120 years after creation if the work was never published. So here's where we need another lawyer. Was Spongebob Squarepants created by Stephen Hillenburg, or was it created by the corporation that oversees Nickelodeon? Obviously, SpongeBob was created by Stephen Hillenburg and pitched to and subsequently sold to Nickelodeon for broadcast, but I could see a lawyer trying to argue that Nickelodeon were effectively the ones that created SpongeBob, since they're the ones that initially published it. So does copyright on SpongeBob expire in 2095, 95 years after the first episode aired on Nickelodeon? Or in 2089, 70 years after the untimely passing of Stephen Hillenburg? I'd say chances are courts will side with the author in a case like this, meaning SpongeBob would enter the public domain in 2089. After all, current copyright law is thankfully primarily concerned with protecting individual authors, rather than corporations. But greedy corporations do have a tendency to work their ways into the pocketbooks of lawmakers, so we'll see. And now, here's a list of when a bunch of things that I missed in the first two videos will enter the public domain, going by the 95 years after publication rule, because I can't be bothered to look up which of these were made by individuals and which were made by corporations. I'm sorry, there's just too many characters. Olive oil and the Hardy Boys are already in the public domain. Little did I know when I made my first two videos, olive oil was actually created before Popeye in 1919, so she entered the public domain in 2015. And the Hardy Boys were made in 1927, so they went into the public domain last year. Tintin, if it was created in the US, would be entering the public domain in 2025, and The Hobbit, if it was published in the US, would be entering the public domain in 2033. The Wizard of Oz will be entering the public domain in 2035, Daisy Duck will be entering the public domain in 2036, as well as The Joker and Lex Luthor. Gumby will be entering the public domain in 2051. The Cat in the Hat will be entering the public domain in 2053, followed by Shrek in 2054. Wait, that's not right. Followed by The Andy Griffith Show in 2056. Alvin and the Chipmunks will be entering the public domain in 2054. Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer will be entering the public domain the same year as The Green Goblin in 2060. Fritz the Cat, the original comic, will be entering the public domain in 2061. Frosty the Snowman will be entering the public domain in 2065, as well as The Brady Bunch. Fritz the Cat the movie will be entering the public domain in 2068. Heathcliff, the comic strip, will be entering the public domain in 2069. The original Arthur book will be entering the public domain in 2072, followed by Star Wars and Chuck E. Cheese in 2073. Tetris, if it was created in the US, would be entering the public domain in 2080, followed by Calvin and Hobbes in 2081, My Little Pony in 2082, and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles in 2083. When I mentioned Sonic the Hedgehog in my first video, I totally forgot that he was in another video game before the original Sonic the Hedgehog. The first appearance of Sonic the Hedgehog was in the video game Rad Mobile from 1990, meaning Sonic the Hedgehog in his keychain form will be entering the public domain in 2086, followed by Rugrats in 2087. Toy Story will be entering the public domain in 2091, followed by both Arthur the TV show and Pokemon in 2092 if Pokemon was created in the US, or if Japan decides to go by the US laws. South Park will be entering the public domain in 2093, followed by Futurama and Family Guy in 2095. Shrek will be entering the public domain in 2097. Bob's Burgers will be entering the public domain in 2107. And Five Nights at Freddy's will be entering the public domain in 2110, the same year as Content Free Time. That's right, I will be entering the public domain in 2110. Or at least my first video will be. If you want to use my likeness in something, you'll have to wait until 70 years after I die. Haha. And lastly, I have a Patreon now. If you liked the video and wanted to see more stuff from me, mainly about video games because that's what I really like talking about, consider supporting me on Patreon at patreon.com/contentfreetime. Link in the description below. You'll also get added benefits, like getting a shout out at the end of each video and helping decide on video topics, and probably more stuff I haven't decided on yet. Thanks for watching!